Wonderful. Well, it's great to be together with all of you again this afternoon. I almost said this morning. I've been operating all day as if it was Thursday. That's how our lives have become during COVID. But I'm Pat Burke. It's great to be with you all again today, and we'll have about an hour together. Gail, correct me if I get anything wrong, but about an hour, and we've got my portion here at the front end will be about 10 minutes, and then we'll go into the rest of our guests. But I'd like to start by acknowledging the country, and Philanthropy Australia acknowledges and pays respects to the past, present, and emerging traditional custodians and elders of the lands on which we work. We also accept the invitation in the Uluru Statement from the Heart to walk together with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in a movement of the Australian people for a better future. If you'd like in the chat function to please put the lands on which you're calling in from, we'd love to see that. So today's agenda, and I'll throw to Amber Moore of Helen McPherson Smith Trust right after I'm finished, and then Amber will throw to Gabby Lamb from Australian Communities Foundation. Then Anita Hopkins will speak from Jack Brockhoff Foundation. We'll have Alberto Fulan from Ian Potter Foundation speak, and then we'll have some time for questions before a wrap up from Gail Rogers of Geelong Community Foundation. And as per usual, if you could just put your questions in the chat function along the way, and then when we get to the end, we'll do our best to go through, and if appropriate, I'll reach out to you directly to ask you to ask the question, because that makes it more fun instead of reading from the chat function. So many of you I understand about half of you have been in this session from last time. So I'm going to skim over some of these updates from where we've come since COVID started last year in the world of philanthropy. But just to set the scene for those who haven't seen this yet, as the peak body for philanthropy, was proud to be part of the team when we introduced a collective response to the COVID-19 crisis last year, pretty early in the year. I think it was around April when we did this. And they came together with guidelines for grant makers to support the not-for-profit sector as best as possible. And during that period of time, there was a signal to philanthropy and a collective act, a signal to our partners, and a signal to the broader community and government that we were working together to do our best in this crisis. And we had this next chart. It shows you the results of 3 surveys that we did of our members from 2 of them were last year. The 3rd survey on the right was conducted, I think, earlier this year, and some of the funders who are presenting today would have participated in that. And we asked them the same questions across all 3 surveys. And this key question, which would be of interest to most of you, is how did you change your granting approach in response to COVID-19? And the blue bar, of course, is the encouraging bar, and it stayed relatively the same, certainly through to survey 1 and survey 3, almost to 90% did change their granting approach. But of concern are the white bars, those towards the bottom that didn't change. And there'd be a variety of reasons for that. And then survey 2 asked, there was this question as well: as we move out of a response phase and turn our minds to recovery, are you considering any longer term changes to your grant making practices and approaches? And initially, there were over 45% that said yes to that. As you can see, almost 30% said no, and there was a cluster that were just unsure. And we'll discuss this a little bit later to get your thoughts. Then in survey 3, interestingly here, which of the changes, if any, had you maintained going into 2021? And I know it's a bit of, this is probably the most detail on any of my slides for you to look at, but have a look at it. It's interesting that those that, the top line had increased flexibility around their existing reporting and administrative requirements, which is a pretty good percentage at nearly at 61.22%. But a lot of the other items there aren't radically different. There's some changes, but not a large percentage. So, and keep this in mind as we move to a bit of a discussion later on. So I want to ask you, so how is it really going for those of you that are seeking funding in community organizations on the ground? Gail and I were having a chat as we were contemplating what today's discussion could be. And I'd like you to have a think while we go through the presentations today and when we get to question and answer. What are your pain points? And we know that, those of us that work in the funding side and in philanthropy more broadly want to see that philanthropy is responsive and nimble and flexible, and that we should be risk takers and be quick to respond. But some of the members that I've spoken to that are part of community organizations that have been seeking funding during this past year and a half have said in some cases they're actually seeing longer application periods and longer to get a response. And I'd be curious to have you all just let's take the temperature on that and let's have a conversation at the end. So make some notes or put some questions in the chat function and we'll look at that. And the word risk aversion came up in some of these discussions. Is that what you think you're seeing from some funders? What's driving some of this and what are you experiencing? Then I'd like to go to another thing that is a bit interesting. It's been quite an interesting week for philanthropy. So across this weekend, many of you would have seen this come up in the news. The $1 Million Vacs initiative was launched, and led by Craig Winkler, who is the founder of MYOB and on our board at Philanthropy Australia, and a wonderful philanthropist. And he's co-founder of this initiative. And its aim is to encourage widespread COVID-19 vaccination and focused on occurring in the month of October, with a broad remit to get as many Victorians vaccinated as possible and get business and life opened up again. Oops, I just went backwards. And since the campaign went live, there's been considerable coverage about the initiative specifically and about philanthropy more broadly too. I had a look online before this session this morning to try to get a sense of if I didn't see anything really sort of negative out there, but it'd be interesting to get your views later when we're having our discussion during Q&A. What's your view on it? What kind of discussions is it creating in your families and friendship and colleague groups? It'd just be interesting to see. So both of these hyperlinks, if you want to click on coverage, you can, or just go out to your browser while we're talking and see what's been happening. So that'll be fun to hear what you have to say about that. And another piece of news that hit, I think this was just announced it just came out yesterday, as it says on the top. So Australians Investing in Women have launched a focus with corporate philanthropy. And it's in a report called Sharpening Our Focus on Corporate Giving, Keeping Gender Equality in the Frame. It addresses the potential of considering women and girls in every social issue and demonstrates how intentional corporate giving with a gender lens can support both priority issues and gender equality, understand how issues specifically affect women and girls, and then safeguards against women and girls being overlooked at critical times, which has been an issue during COVID, and invest in solving the problems for the long term. There's a good quote here from Elizabeth Broderick, AO, founders of Champions of Change, that I think captures it. It's not only giving to women and girls or giving more, it's about being intentionally equitable in our giving to every cause. So that's it's been a big week for philanthropy, and there may be other stories out there that you know of that I've missed. So then if I move on, for those of you that aren't completely familiar with Philanthropy Australia and the work we're doing, this piece of work called the Blueprint to Grow Structured Giving was launched at our conference earlier this year in April. And it's going to provide a sort of a roadmap for much of our work over the next at least 5 years. And as you can see, what's here, we're going to work to grow giving across many categories, and the blueprint itself, which is available at our website, and we can share it with those of you that are unfamiliar with it. But it's an exciting piece of work that will drive what we're doing. And so the why behind it is that we were expecting an unprecedented transfer of intergenerational wealth that we've been talking about for many years now, but as the baby boomers age, there'll be more and more of that money flowing into the system. And it could really supercharge giving in Australia by 2030. Corporate giving is at an all-time high. So if you look at the announcement just from Australians investing in women, there's quite a lot of giving from corporates. And I think the last report I saw said it had increased to actually 30% over this past year. So there's a lot of momentum there, and that's exciting. The proportion of Australians who give has been trending down for 15 years, and arresting this decline is an important piece of work that we're going to look at through the blueprint. And the fourth bullet, wealthy Australians. Wealth in Australia is increasing, but the proportion of those who give, who are wealthy, is actually decreasing. So it's important for us to have some strategies around how we can influence them to give more, to give and to give more. And research shows that attitudes towards giving are established early in life and can be difficult to change once formed. And we are talking about having some sort of a campaign or something that can build a pipeline of givers and create a more giving Australia. So the community responses to the 2019-20 bushfires and COVID-19 reinforced the increasing importance of community and place-based philanthropy, which can be leveraged now for the future growth and benefit. And this Geelong cooperative that you all have formed is a great example of best practice community philanthropy. The 2021 priorities that are worth summarizing real quickly are on this slide, and a big part of it is around just the structured giving and cutting back on red tape to enable better philanthropy. We're looking at whether a living legacy trust structure could be a possibility, and removing barriers to donating excess superannuation. So there's a lot of interesting work going on with our policy and research part of Philanthropy Australia. And at the bottom, the enablers. A coalition of the giving is a group that's going to happen through this blueprint, and that's going to be an exciting thing that we'll be telling you more about over the next 6 to 12 months. And that's to drive and champion and lead the initiatives that the blueprint will have. So then what's up next at PA? And I'm almost finished. Just to give you a quick snapshot, we've got it every year when we come to October and November. I know all of you share this. It's such an incredibly busy time of our social sector calendar more broadly, but PA always has, we really have our track shoes on and are running hard to deliver a lot of things in October and November before we shuffle off for a holiday at the end of the year. So a good one I can strongly recommend, please, if you can dial in, it'll be by Zoom, the October 14th, just next week, the Road Ahead, the Future of Philanthropy in Australia. And that's our lead speaker in that is Carol Schwartz, who was awarded the Leading Philanthropist Award earlier late last year. And then 19 October, operationalizing Indigenous data sovereignty. Very interesting subject that I encourage you to attend if that's a funding area of focus for you. And then on 16 November, an online celebration of our Australian Philanthropy Awards. And one of the things that's really great for community organizations to sit in on that is it's a little bit, if you look at it as a workshop on best practice philanthropy, there's a lot to be learned on why those awards occur, why they're celebrated, because it's something like a very small donation that's given very strategically can create great social change. So a number of categories there, and I encourage you to come. And on 7 December, and I mentioned this in another network yesterday, we've just found out that that's the day we'll announce our new strategic plan. And we are told that we can actually have a celebration. So hopefully for those of us in Melbourne and Sydney, we won't be sitting in this sort of room for that celebration. We're hoping very much that it will be hosted by one of our partners in Melbourne, Sydney, and then the other lucky cities, Adelaide, Brisbane, and Perth are able to already have something live that night. So, and face-to-face. So, and then the conference and the big calendar for next year will announce a bit about it later this year, and certainly more in first quarter of next year. So that's enough for me, and I'll stop sharing my slides, and I'd like to now turn it over to Amber to tell you a bit about what's happening at HMS Trust.
Thanks so much, Pat. Hello, everyone. I'm pleased to be here with you today. I'd like to first acknowledge the Wurundjeri people, the traditional custodians of the land which I'm coming to you today, and pay respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I am one of 2 grants advisors at the Trust. In the areas of interest that I look after are community, environment, and health. And my colleague is Sarah Bartak, and she looks after arts and culture and education. We're a testamentary trust that was established in the will of Helen Macpherson Smith with an original bequest of £275,000 in 1951, which roughly was equivalent of around $550,000. There was very little known about Helen, but historical documents do show that she was a regular donor to Victorian charities, and as such her bequest was left with the instructions to establish a trust for the benefit of Victorians, and as such we have a Victoria only remit. Since the trust was established, the bequest has grown to approximately 130 million, and since 1972, which is when the trust first started giving grants, we've given out approximately that same amount, $130 million in grants. We consider ourselves a mid-sized trust, and we give away around 4.5 million a year in grants. Now, I am just going to try and take over control of the slides. Sorry, I wasn't able to share my slides. There we go. So we'll start with what kind of organisations are eligible. And they are organisations that are registered as a charity with the ACNC. You do not need to have DGR status, but you do need to have a head office in Victoria. You can work outside of Victoria, but your office does need to be in Victoria. And as the next slide will show you, that the projects you're applying for funding for need to be undertaken solely in Victoria for the benefit of Victorians. They need to have a charitable purpose. They need to align with one of our program focus areas, which I will get to in a second. And they also need to have a strong match across HMS Trust's grant strategy in general. We just applied our new strategy at the beginning of the financial year, and we're just about to close off this afternoon, actually, our second round under that new strategy. This is a snapshot of our strategic framework, which just shows you our priority areas, so our target beneficiaries, our program focus areas. We've got 5 program areas and 6 focus areas community has 2 focus areas that sit under that, and I'll cover that in a second. We support projects that are using one of these 5 levers for change to be able to work towards achieving one of our 3 long-term impact goals. And I'll cover all of that now. So our program and focus areas, we have education, and the focus area in that is engaging and retaining P to 12 students. So we really are looking for projects that show vision and innovation to solving entrenched and evolving problems, and are really looking to tackle those issues that the youth, at-risk youth, so youth that are at risk of disengaging with education. Solutions that look to, I guess, support those students more in their schooling. Community, we have advancing early childhood development, and we're looking for systemic and service-based funding opportunities that aim to advance the development of children in the first 5 years of their life by implementing whole community cross-sectoral approaches to supporting healthy development outcomes for children and families. Building community financial resilience is our second focus area under community. We're looking to support financial literacy and capability building initiatives that are designed to improve the financial inclusion, resilience and well-being of Victorians who are less advantaged. Arts and culture, their focus is supporting the sustainability of the arts sector. As we know, COVID-19 has caused the arts and culture sector is completely decimated. So we're looking to support initiatives that build the capacity and the capabilities of Victorian arts organisations. Environment focus area is supporting the restoration and protection of sustainable environments. And we look to do this through funding through a range of biodiversity, wildlife, sustainability, climate change and community programs, and initiatives that encourage sustainable land practices, improve land and water systems and connectivity across landscapes. And we really do look for traditional owner engagement with on-country projects. Our final program area is health, where we look to improve access to affordable mental health care. And we look for opportunities that are collaborative and have the potential to contribute to the 65 recommendations in the Royal Commission into Victoria's mental health system. So this is quite a niche focus area. We really are looking for a targeted focus on improving access to mental health services. As mentioned, your project needs to align to at least one of our long-term impact goals, and quite often we find that applications, they align to more than one. It's not a problem if you only do align to one, but quite often you'll find synergy with more than one of our long-term impact goals. So we're looking to build sustainable and capable organisations, looking to support solutions that have the potential to either address gaps in service delivery or change sector practice. And finally, we're looking to support projects that address the root causes of the social problems that impact the communities we choose to support. And we do this by focusing our resources on the components and structures of the systems that drive social change. Some of the key things we look for when we are assessing grant applications is the potential for leverage and what our funding can do for your organisation. And will that attract more funding for you? Will it build your capacity and allow you to have greater impact in the long term? The sustainability and the long-term thinking, they're quite similar, where we do take into account your organisation's financial capacity to deliver the proposed project. And we do consider whether the project can continue to run outside of the funding period, if that's the nature of that project. Obviously, if we're funding the development of a strategic plan, there's no need for ongoing funding with that project. But for projects that are delivering services to the community that are intended to be ongoing, we do look at what the potential is for those projects to be sustained outside of the funding period. Evaluation is something that our trustees acknowledge is very important. And we do look for organisations that have embedded evaluation plans into their project plans. And we often, if that information is lacking, we will contact you and speak to you about what your evaluation plans are. And collaboration, we do place priority on projects that are highly collaborative and that are consulting with the community where appropriate, and that those partnerships you have in place are confirmed. Our grant rounds for next year, we are kicking off with a special interest grants round, which has a focus on women and girls. This is the first, this grant round is new under the new strategy, and it's the first time we have applied a gender lens. So they have multi-year grants up to 3 years and up to 150,000. All applications still need to match to one program and focus area and align to our strategy in general. But there is the added requirement that the target beneficiary group must be solely women and girls. This is coming out of COVID-19 and a way for the Trust to extend our response. Last year we had response and recovery grants in response to COVID-19, and this was a way for us to embed that continued response into our strategy. The special interest grants, the theme will change year on year. For FY22, it is women and girls. We then have the major grants round. The EOIs will open in April. We are still confirming our dates, but it will be sometime in April. And they are up to 400,000. And we only have funding for around 4 to 6 grants in this round. And it's not appropriate for small one-off projects. We're really looking for projects that are intended to achieve significant impact. Perhaps the projects have already been piloted and they're ready to scale up. And so those application forms are quite detailed. Then we have our capacity building grants. As you would imagine by their name, these are for capacity building initiatives only. Generally they're for only 1 year, maybe at the most 18 months. Priority is given to small to medium organisations as the ACNC classification. And these grants, we're looking to fund projects such as business modelling, strategic planning, evaluation, piloting, anything that will build your capacity to achieve stronger impact against your mission. Just some tips on our application process. Obviously, first up, ensure you're eligible and check that your project aligns to our strategy. We then have an EOI process for all levels of grants, which would be followed up and reviewed by myself and Sarah. We will then shortlist. We'll advise those who can proceed to application. You'll be sent a link to an application form. And applications are always due at midday on the due date. Just sometimes that can trip people up. I can't emphasize that enough. Some hints and tips, as we call them. If your project does not really snugly fit against our criteria, and you believe it's truly a great project, but it really is not a weak fit, we would recommend that you don't apply, and we would have that conversation with you. I've been a grant writer in the past. I know how long it takes to develop, good proposals, and we don't want anyone to waste their time. The fact is that our grant rounds are highly competitive, and really only those that are very strongly matched to our strategy will get through, and will only be approved through to application as well. So if you don't have a good fit, it's probably not best to pursue it, but we are always open to having a chat to you. We have an open door policy, and we can always guide you, and we can put you in touch with any of our peer funders that we know work in the areas perhaps that are a better fit to your projects. We recommend you're looking at our website and who we've funded before and the types of projects to give you a good idea also of what kind of projects are usually a good fit under our strategy as well. The rest of the details there I can just leave for you to read, but they're all on our website also, obviously around ensuring your budget is accurate and realistic. Ensuring that you don't generalise with really broad statements, but be a little bit more specific. The thing with Helen McPherson Smith Trust is if we feel that your applications are ever lacking a little bit of information, we will come back to you and ask you for information. So it's not that you just send your application in and the next time you hear from us, it's whether it's been approved or not. We will work with you to put your best foot forward with your application. But just in general, we ask for you to not provide really broad statements. And when you have evidence to back up those statements, it's always good to refer to that evidence as well. And as I said, if you're ever unsure about any of the grants process, to please contact myself or my colleague, Sarah Bartak. And that is all. Thank you very much.
I think it's over to me.
Yeah, take it away, Gabby. Thanks.
Okay, will do. I'll just share my screen. Okay, thank you, everyone. My name's Gabby, and firstly, I would like to acknowledge that I'm dialing in from the lands of the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So I'm the grants coordinator at Australian Communities Foundation, and my role within the foundation is to support our fund holders with their giving journeys and to coordinate the granting process from start to finish. So today I'm going to give you a brief introduction to ACF and then talk through the various ways that we make grants. So Australian Communities Foundation is the only nationally focused community foundation in Australia. Our vision is to create a fairer Australia by activating a nation of givers and increasing philanthropic funds to the community. In short, we connect those who can give with the people and organisations on the ground. What sets us apart from other more traditional philanthropic trusts and foundations is that as a public ancillary, we are a public ancillary fund. So we are made up of over 360 sub-funds, and each of these funds have their own funding priorities and capacity. Basically, anyone can start a sub-fund at ACF. So our funds are made up of families, individuals, corporate groups, special interest giving circles, fundraising funds, and also not-for-profit future funds. Essentially, we make structured giving easy and accessible to people that might not otherwise have the means to start their own family foundation. In financial year 1920, we gave out $12 million across 900 grants. So that just gives an indication. We give a lot of grants, but we give a lot of smaller grants, with the average grant size being around $14,000. In the last year, we saw a large increase in giving and gave out just over $15 million. And this was largely due to the bushfire response, as well as COVID-19 response grants. And this was in line with what we saw across the sector of philanthropy as well. This next slide shows the geographic spread of where ACF's funding goes. So as you can see, there's a large majority that is given within Victoria, and that's largely due to the fact that ACF started out as the Melbourne Community Foundation. So most of our sub-funds are located within the state. As an organisation, the main focus areas we report on are supporting Indigenous self-determination, tackling inequality, safeguarding the environment, and strengthening democracy. However, as we represent such a wide range of sub-fund holders, we give across a range of areas. So anything from education and training to arts and culture and to health and well-being. Essentially, if a cause is charitable, then we can give to it. In terms of our giving, about 85% of the grants we give are called what we call donor advised. And that means that donors or fund holders can request a grant be given from their sub-fund at any time throughout the year. And essentially, we provide the admin support and the structure to do this. And so it's for this reason, we don't have regular grant rounds as such. And instead, we have a fortnightly grant approval schedule with money going out the door every 2 weeks. Most of this funding is general in nature, with our sub-funders quite happy to support general operating costs. The remaining 15% of our giving is what we call ACF advised. And that is largely what my role is at ACF. So part of what I do is regularly meet with our fund holders to discuss their granting and provide advice, undertake research to match them with organisations and causes that they might align with. And we also run donor learning events. We reach out regularly via emails and newsletters and direct EDMs that focus on specific issue areas or geographic areas. So when we're looking at good granting principles, we generally look for mission alignment. So does the project align with the funder's wishes and ACF more generally? The relevant skill set. So does the organisation have the right qualifications to do what they want? And also good governance. We strongly encourage our sub-funds to provide untied funding, which recognises the trust that they have in organisations' abilities to run their operations. We also encourage multi-year support so that organisations can forward plan and encourage our sub-funds to collectively fund on projects together. So this is a big part of our community of giving, is that our sub-funders can leverage their own grants and be part of bigger projects. So also we host a funding platform on our website, and this is the first point of reference for potential grantees. So this is a public facing platform that is essentially a list of proposals that are submitted by organisations. Using an online form, organisations can submit up to 2 proposals in a calendar year, and they'll stay up on the platform for 3 months. The proposals can be tagged and searched by area of focus, target population, and we also have a special appeals tab, so they can be tagged with COVID-19 if it's a COVID-19 specific proposal. This form itself has been designed to be as pain-free as we can make it, so we don't want to increase the burden on organisations. So it's essentially made up of 4 sections, just organisation summary, project outcomes, and a very high level budget. We generally suggest organisations apply for between $5,000 and $20,000 on the platform, as this is a level that is just a little bit more accessible for our donors. We recommend that organisations have a clear ask and a clear budget. And the other thing we look at is whether there's been other funding committed and if it's fulfilling a legitimate need or gap. The main purpose of the platform itself is to introduce our funders to organisations that they may not have heard of. And so by doing this, we are generating visibility of that organisation. If a funder is interested in contributing, then we generally will reach out to the organisation and ask for more information at that point. So in terms of eligibility, most of our sub-funds sit within the main public ancillary fund, which means that they have to give to organisations that have tax charity concession and DGR1 status. However, we're very happy to discuss auspice arrangements and do this quite frequently. And so to make a submission onto the platform, we would just go to the website and it's under the Making a Difference tab here and then seeking funding. So it's all online. As well as the funding portal, ACF also has 2 discretionary funds. So these are the funds that we have control over where the funding goes. One of which is the Impact Fund, which I won't go into today, and the other is the National Crisis Response Fund. So this fund was launched last year and is a collective fund that we fundraise into that focuses on filling the gaps that have been left by government in response to crises and getting support to those hard to reach places. The fund is mobilised when needed and always with the same focus. So as money is donated, we then grant it out to organisations. At the beginning of the year, we also had a small call out for the floods, but most of it so far has been the COVID-19 response. And because of through this fund, we gave out 600,000 in COVID response last year, and we're continuing to fundraise so we can continue to distribute more. And that is all from me. Thank you so much for listening. Please feel free to reach out at any time if you have any questions and you want to get in touch about how you can get in front of our funder community more, especially getting onto that portal as well. And
thanks heaps, Gabby.
My share.
There
you go.
Just do the little tap dance here and hand over to Anita.
And over to Anita.
Yes. 1 second, I'll just share my screen. Okay, is that all good? Everyone can see that? Great. Lovely to be here today. I'm like Gabby on the lands of the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation today. Very fortunate to be, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I'm the Executive Officer of the Jack Brockhoff Foundation, and also recently become the Executive Officer of the Brian M. Davis Charitable Foundation, but I'll perhaps leave that one till next year. So the Jack Brockhoff Foundation is a Victorian-based foundation. I'll just flick through to the next slide. Sorry. It's not letting me go to the next one for some reason. No. Oh, there we go. So the Jack Brockhoff Foundation was established in 1979 by Sir Jack Brockhoff, who was alive at the time. It exists to support the health and wellbeing of Victorians. It's established as a public ancillary fund, which means that we can only give to organisations that are tax concession charities and have DGR1 status. It has a key focus on small grassroots community organisations. You'll see from the picture of the biscuits on the slide, Sir Jack Brockhoff made his fortune through Brockhoff biscuits, which I have to admit I hadn't heard of until I started at the foundation. But when I started going through all the old biscuit tins in the office, realised that a lot of the biscuits we now know as Arnott's were originally Brockhoff. So it just gives you an idea of some of those biscuits where he made his fortune from. The purpose of the foundation is, well, we have three main aims of the foundation: to celebrate and continue to build on the legacy of Sir Jack Brockhoff and his passion in philanthropy, in a way that addresses contemporary social issues, to build on the sustainability of small not-for-profits, which are obviously distinctive in the type of support they provide the community, and to work collaboratively to leverage our resources and to ensure the best outcomes for community. Hence why we're a part of the Geelong Collaborative Funders Group. So I'll just go to the trouble with going to that. There we go. What I've tried to do here is to show our grants program on one page, which may have been a little bit ambitious in hindsight, but I'll just go through the three areas. So the program's split in between three core areas: children and youth, community, and medical research. The budget of the foundation is basically split between these three areas. We currently have a corpus of around 60 million, so the grants distribution ranges from sort of 2 to 2.4 million a year, depending on how the market's going. In terms of the children and youth program, we run that is open in February and goes to the board in May. It's targeting young people between 8 and 25 and has two main sub-focus areas, if you like: addressing youth homelessness and pathways to education, employment and training. It's a mix of funding, so single-year grants, providing seed capital there. We do fund quite a number of social enterprise. We do some multi-year, though I have to admit, going back to Pat's comment about foundations becoming risk averse, the last 18 months has seen us do less multi-year funding. I'm hoping that will change going into next year. But at the moment, we're only doing small numbers of multi-year grants. And we also fund capacity building, research and evaluation. And the grants in that program tend to be between 10 and 50,000. The community grant round is focused in 4 areas. So ageing, disability, addressing poverty and disadvantage, and emergency relief and food aid. Ageing is around supporting housing initiatives for older women and addressing social isolation. Disabilities around housing initiatives and innovative approaches to employment. The Addressing Poverty and Disadvantage program is really capacity building for small grassroots community organisations. And we will provide multi-year core operating support for those small organisations as well, although like I just said, we're only doing smaller numbers of those at the moment. And we have a separate emergency relief and food aid program that's an invitation only program where we fund about half a dozen organisations for 3 years to provide emergency relief and food aid. So the community program is more focused on the sort of smaller organisations. Like the children and youth, it's a mix of single year grants, multi-year capacity building support and evaluation. We don't tend to fund research under the community program just because the grants tend to be smaller. And we also run a small grants program for basic infrastructure, IT support, training volunteers. Those are grants up to 10,000, and then the community grants are 10 to 50,000. And then thirdly, our medical research grant round, which is focused on supporting early career researchers. So researchers who have completed their PhD within the last 3 years. And this is to provide additional support so that they can do a unique piece of research to help them further their career. We noticed there was a gap for early career researchers. They needed to have enough work under their belt, if you like, research under their belt to be able to get government support for medical research. So this gives them that opportunity. They do need to have their salaries guaranteed by the institution. And we only allow 2 applications per institution, which means we only tend to receive around 30 applications a year in that program. So to give you an idea of the numbers of grants, I guess applications we receive in each. Normally we'd receive sort of 40 to 50 applications per year in the children and youth and community grant rounds. That's normally. We've just run a community grant round and we received 75 applications. In terms of our process for all 3 grant rounds, I ask organisations to send me an email or phone, preferably email, with a short summary of what they'd like to apply for. And I then suggest or suggest not to whether to apply. So I'm really trying to save organisations from spending time completing applications if I don't think they'll get through. Which is why our success rate in terms of the applications tends to be around 50%. Obviously for this latest grant round, it won't be that high because of the large number of applications we've received. In terms of the process internally, when the applications round closes, I review all of the applications and rank them. They then go to a subcommittee of the board who then review my review. And then that subcommittee of the board puts a recommendation, the subcommittee puts recommendation to the board for which grants to be approved. I won't go through sort of our criteria for assessment. We do have detailed guidelines on the website and I'm more than happy to talk to people about that. We are a relatively small foundation and that I'm the sole staff member. Hence why I ask organisations to email first, but I do speak to everybody who submits an application and go through their application with them. And I think that's it. And I'll hand over to Alberto.
Thank you, Anita. I'm not sure whether or not you're still there. Look, I don't have a slideshow, unfortunately. I just sought to do this differently. First of all, let me acknowledge that I also come from Melbourne and the land of Wurundjeri Woi people, and acknowledge their elders, past, present, and emerging. My name is Alberto Fulan. I'm a senior program manager at the Ian Potter Foundation, and I've been with the foundation for almost 12 years. So I'm part of the furniture, both the foundation and the philanthropic landscape in Melbourne. You could say that. And look, the Ian Potter Foundation is a fairly large foundation, and one of the probably most diverse foundation in terms of interest in Melbourne and Australia. It was originally funded by Sir Ian Potter in 1964. With £1 million back then, and has now a corpus close to $900 million, which means that we distribute about 30. This year we will distribute about $35 to $38 million. Having said that, about half of that is already committed, and the reason being that all our grants are multi-year. So every year, of course, we approve new grants, but we also pay the grants that we established in the previous 2 to 3 years. So there's about $14 to $15 million of new money every year. We are fairly large and fairly diverse in our interest. We operate through our what we call our 4 pillars that recapitulate our mission, which is for a healthy, fair, vibrant, and sustainable Australia. So we have these 4 pillars: fair, which encompasses early childhood development for programs targeting children 0 to 8, community well-being, which is the area that I look after, that focuses on organizations that provide pathways onto employment for people that are experiencing vulnerability or disadvantage. Healthy pillar, which encompasses medical research equipment grants for research institutions and public health initiatives that target Indigenous Australian issues of mental health, of anxiety, depression in older Australians, and prevention of chronic illnesses. The vibrant pillar, which for us is essentially arts and focuses on first-rate artistic institutions and help them to host artists and support their people with professional development. And finally, the sustainable pillar, which is environment, which focuses on ecosystem and landscape approach, backed by scientific evidence, and looks to develop sustainable resource management. Now, all of this is very well explained on our website. That's why I didn't necessarily want to put a slide in and go over these things, and apologies for going over this fairly quickly. I just want to focus rather on our methodology and the way that we engage with people, organizations on the ground. As I said before, all our grants are multi-year. All our grants are a minimum of $100,000, which can be across multiple years or each year. That's generally the size of our grants. We never fund, however, more than generally 50 to 60% with any given project, which means that we seek financial leverage for our grants. So either the applicant itself or other funders should be in the budget for the project. We operate through an expressions of interest process, whereby we encourage grant seekers to give us a call first to discuss their project. Subsequent to that, we'll advise whether or not you're recommended to submit an expression of interest. The expression of interest will be scrutinized by our committees, and the applicants might be invited to put a full application in, which will be scrutinized again by the committee and the full board, and then a grant will be awarded. This is a process that we have established about 5 years ago, because prior to that, we used to receive something like 90 applications per area per round, and we have 3 rounds a year back then. So we were essentially receiving too large number of applications, which meant most of the applicants on the other end were missing out on grants, because despite a large amount of money, it's still limited based on the request and need of the sector. So the expression of interest process, and prior to that, the phone call helps organization to ascertain whether or not that program is in line with our guidelines, which I've talked to before. We really see philanthropy truly as a partnership, not as an economic transaction. So we seek to establish a relationship with organizations prior to even the grant application, but certainly after that. We visit every project that we take to board. In these days, of course, it's sadly a Zoom meeting, but in not too distant long future, we hope that we'll be able to travel again. So myself and my other 4 colleagues are traveling across Australia to visit the project, and this provides an invaluable opportunity for us to learn on the ground by the organization that are delivering the programs. And then after the grant has been awarded, we continue to have a relationship with the applicants, grantees, by establishing reporting periods because of multi-year grants, but also by, again, visiting them as the project progresses, and also making available our research and evaluation officer in-house to support the grantees with their evaluation framework, which we can also support. So the idea is that you contact us, you read our guidelines first on our website, you contact us to discuss your project, and then we'll develop a relationship based on that. Not all projects might be suitable for us. We don't want you trying to fit your project along our guidelines. It's more the other way around. We just need to try to find a point of contact between our direction that we're both going. More and more, we are looking at capacity building for organization as well. So not just programmatic funding, but funding that will support organization to take the next step. And this will be untied core funding. Again, those will still need to be in line with our priorities and guidelines. Other than that, I will encourage you to have a look at our website, look our knowledge center on our website that has a list, a searchable list of all the grants we have given since 1964. And especially in the last few years, see if the project that you are running or want to run are sort of matching with our priorities, and then give us a call. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Alberto. And everyone, thank you all presenters. That was very valuable too. And it's great for me to get an update too. This is wonderful. So look, I'm looking at the chat function. I don't see a heap of questions. In fact, I don't see any, and I'm wondering if it just hasn't updated. Cynthia and Gail and Sam, are you seeing anything come through, or is everyone just in stunned silence? But an opportunity now for us the floor is yours, our guests. You're very welcome to ask questions of any of these fine grant makers that are here, and I can triage if there's a lot coming in. But yeah, I can see your smiling faces. I'm scrolling through and looking at all of you. Hi, Austin, I just saw you. There you are. So yeah, take advantage of this opportunity, everyone. So Gail, do you have something you can throw out to get the conversation going, or anyone?
I think the presentations were so good. I think everybody's been able to access, the information that they need, and obviously all of the organisations have great resources on their websites. So I think that tip to start there is a really good tip. But it's just great to have the opportunity to bring these 4 organisations in this Zoom space to be able to share their knowledge and information with everyone in the room. I think Kevin has a question.
There's a big long one that just came in. Kevin, take it away.
Kevin, you're on mute.
Mine was really to make a comment in reaction really to Alberto's contribution, which I found encouraging. And that's not to discount any of the other grants. One of the difficulties I've always found is when you are constantly relying on grants, your whole structure of the organisation has to be built around that. So sustainability of continuous effort is one of the hardest things to maintain. So you start, and I'm thinking of a particular program that we have where there are about 4 parts to it that have all been cobbled together by grants, which we're now looking to get into a whole that would take something substantial. So I'm encouraged by that, and I suspect that others are the same, that oftentimes you find yourself a prisoner to the whole requirements of grant maintenance and reporting, and that's not to in any way denigrate what all the foundations are doing. It's just a point that I made, that we get to a point where we do need something that helps that sustainability, but there are elements in what we do that require one-off things, but the major thing of most organisations is sustaining the core and keeping that core so that the effort can be maintained. And I do really like that notion of partnership. That's just a comment. Sorry.
No, thank you, Kevin. It's really valuable to hear that. And that segues rather perfectly into from saying the word partnership. From Andrea Lemon from Kids Thrive. If developing large project in Geelong, does one go to each of you separately, or is there a combined process? I'm guessing separately.
I'll take this one if you want. Look, collaboration is one of the things that philanthropy is slowly but surely trying to grapple. It's been, said about it for the past 15, 20 years. It's not easy. It's not for the lack of trying, but we're all different foundations, have different priorities, have different timelines. So it's a challenging process, but it's one that we tried really to address. We have very regular conversations with our peers in philanthropy. We also have projects on the boil at the moment between 3 or 4 foundations, specifically for collaborative projects. We often find ourselves when we receive the budget next to the line that mentions another foundation. So very much aware of the challenges of the sector that put us together. All I would say is that probably start with one and see if they're willing to, involve the others. We, in the past, hosted regular forums with organizations inviting other philanthropic foundations, and part of the role that I carved for myself in recent weeks at the foundation is to encourage those partnerships to really happen. So yes, start with one and see if they're available to talk to their peers.
Just thank you, Alberto. Just adding to that, on behalf of ACF, because we give a lot of smaller grants, we can also be seen as sort of a gap filler for projects that just need that little bit extra and maybe have a lot of commitments from other funders, and just seeking that final amount that we can usually just share around a select few of our funders to be able to try and raise that final gap.
Yeah. Brilliant. And Peter, you've got quite an interesting comment, and it's probably a tough one to address fully in this forum. But I suppose it goes a bit to some of my earlier slides around philanthropy being responsive, and yet the grant makers in this room are making every effort to be that and to do that. Did you want to comment on that?
Thank you, and for the invitation to the forum. And I was being a little bit maybe deliberately provocative given the opportunity. At the bottom of the question, there's a link to our blog on Greta Thunberg's latest speech in Europe last week, where
you're fading in and out a bit, Peter. There you go.
Turn my camera off then. Sorry.
Good.
Blah, blah, blah of the institutionalized politics of climate change. COP26 that's coming up in Glasgow at the end of the year, and she wanted to world leaders in various contexts to embrace the sense of crisis that she and lots of other young people feel about what the world is at this point in time. And so the provocation here is, I think, in terms of those partnerships and collaborations that I seek to work with as a university, the game, how we change the conversation, how we change the sorts of thinking frameworks, collaborations, and the role that philanthropy, which has a role, I think, has in changing the rules of the game, because of the rules of the game at the moment have got us into the crises, multiple crises that we're in. And Greta would say that the rules of the game need changing. So it was a provocation. And I do it without any malice or any criticism or anything like that. I just think, you know, we are in this together, as some people say, but we're all in it differently. So I think the rules of the game quite possibly need changing.
Thank you, Peter. Look, it's marvelous when we have that sort of discussion and debate, and we want our rooms where we bring everybody together, where differing views, where we're able to discuss, you know, all sides of it, and hopefully come up with solutions. And on the second thought I had on that is there's a podcast that was done recently with our storyteller at PA, Nick Richardson, and he interviewed the two New Gen chairs at Philanthropy Australia. And you can go to our website, just put podcast in the search box and you'll find it. But I was listening to it the other day on, you know, one of my endless walks, as we all do. But the thinking of young people and what they're so concerned about climate change, as they should be, and they're approaching problems a bit differently than the older generation. So there's quite a lot of inspiration, you know, as you say, with Greta Thunberg as an incredible model that she is. So we've got to continue these conversations and push for positive change. So I mean, that's my broad response. Does anyone have anything else you'd like to say?
Oh, Pat, perhaps I'll just comment. I mean, I think there's the philanthropic sector is made up of a very diverse group of foundations. I think there's probably philanthropic foundations that are working in that space. And it'd just be about finding them. And I think, having spoken recently to the Foundation for Young Australians and some of the fantastic work that they're doing, I think it's just about finding the right partners. Yeah, so look, I'm happy to have a look at the work and maybe suggest a couple of organisations you could go to, if that's helpful.
Brilliant. That's brilliant.
One of the organisations is in the room. Cynthia is from Costa Foundation has funded our project that we're doing in Geelong at the moment, and very receptive to some of those ideas. So again, I'm not saying that the sector isn't. I'm thinking of, you know, that COVID is actually a harbinger of things to come. You know, the crises are emerging, and young people in particular are incredibly aware of that. So again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And like I said, I think there's a spectrum of very conservative, and I know that because I work for one of them, to the other end of very progressive. So yeah, it's just about finding the right partnership and encouraging more of them to be more progressive.
Now I'm trying to keep up with the chat. It's on fire now. There's one from Marilyn Murnane to everyone. It just says question for Pat. Marilyn.
Pat, it's I'm on my wife's laptop, so it's Pat Murnane. So I had a question and a comment really, and whilst I've got all you good people there. My question was really around the comment you made about philanthropy, looking at its structures and its future. And I think we're all aware that in society, people are starting to, and especially young people, to take notice and advice from organisations that are non-traditional, like the church or the school or whatever. They've been influenced by a whole range of different organisations. And one of the areas that we've seen a little bit is in the club scene, where a lot of small organisations are looking to have welfare officers, because a lot of young people are turning to those sorts of organisations for advice and guidance. But they don't hold DGR status. Plus they don't have capacity to employ a lot. I was just wondering, is there an opportunity, or could you see philanthropy developing some sort of off-the-shelf type a structure that might have some limitations, but a non-entity like a club could actually have an entity which they could raise funds from the public for a purpose, like a welfare officer, in a tax effective type of environment.
Sounds like a good idea to me. I mean, with our grant makers in the room, what are your thoughts?
Well, there already is Sports Australia, which provides that capacity of DGR1 status to projects from sports-related organizations. So there actually already is a structure, Pat, that people can use. So I know Joey's has used it. I know, just trying to think of some of the other clubs. The rowing club here in Geelong has used it. So it's similar to like Schools Plus, which does it for education, FRRR, which does it for grassroots community organizations. So there actually are structures, I think, that are there. Maybe it's about connecting those clubs to those structures.
But my understanding, and I may not be correct here for Sim, but I thought that was for equipment, not for sort of personnel like welfare officers and the like. Is that changed, or?
I think it's for projects. So, but we can check that, Pat.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Now I'm looking through the questions and can't frankly keep up. Gail or Cynthia, if there's anything that you see that you, let's see how, and this is from Dan, how can we, the philanthropic sector, encourage grant making processes, in brackets, application, reporting, stewardship, etc., to be commensurate with the level of funding? Any thoughts?
I think it's about a question of process. So, the onus on a phone call or an expression of interest in our case is quite small, because we don't want the organization to write 15 pages applications that are unlikely to be funded. The 15 pages application will always be there because we have to go through a process of due diligence. So it's a matter of, as you increase the level of funding given, it makes writing that worthwhile. Others might have other processes, but we're trying to simplify them. In terms of one report, one application, one whatever, four or five funders, we're still a fair bit away from that, and probably never will get there because we are very, very different. But we are willing to take the cut and paste version of some other funders reporting. So we're making progress in that point of view.
It's interesting because this is part of a broader conversation around, I guess, like the standard sort of forms, and potentially trying to make it easier for the grant seeker when it is a smaller grant. So I've heard some funders talking about, is there a way, and Gabby, like smaller grants, your community grants that are 5,000 or 10,000. So for the sub funds, would they do something a little bit less onerous for the smaller?
I mean, this is always a conversation that we're continually having within the foundation itself. So we've just recently switched all of our grant making processes to one database essentially. So, and part of that is, I mean, we do need to tick all the boxes of having a grant agreement set up, but we're trying to make that easier for organizations, that everyone gets a login, they can just do it all online and don't need to sign things as much as they had to in the past. And then on the reporting side of things, we've tried to sort of have tiers where possible, so that, you know, it is in level with the amount of funding that we give. We're quite happy to get just annual reports for general purpose grants that are quite small. We can also, we're quite happy to get any other reports that are already being made for other organizations as well. So it is a conversation we're continually having within our organization, and we've got an impact and insights manager who manages what level and what we're tracking with our grantees as well, because a lot of what we are looking at is how the foundation is having an impact, and how do you sum up 900 grants into what the foundation is doing is a very difficult question to answer.
Yeah, it is. Any other thoughts?
Patricia, I'm the Kevin Fuller that's been on the screen, the mysterious Kevin Fuller. My wife and I have a humanitarian aid organisation called Les Pêcheurs International. We're based in Geelong, and our focus is on Madagascar, which is one of the 3 poorest nations on the earth. And as a matter of fact, the young man that you can see sitting here is my Madagascan colleague. He was executive director of our work in Madagascar. We have had tremendous support from Cynthia and the Anthony Costa Foundation in Geelong. We do 2 fundamental things. One is, and the reason I'm telling this is because we're really looking to find somebody that will work on this project with us in this country and other countries, where I developed 26 units of small business training, which people without any education go through. They come into our training centre in Antananarivo, the capital, once a week for a full day for 6 months. And at the end of the day, they finish with a full business plan for 5 years. And if we think they've got a viable business plan, we give them a small loan, interest-free, which they have to repay. So my wife and I pay for all the operating expenses. And so we can say to people that give donations to us that whatever they give goes 100% to the purpose for which it was intended. So we put through many hundreds of people through the program, so that by putting them through these micro enterprise training programs, they actually can start a business, they can feed their families, they can send their children to school, they can involve their relatives ultimately in the program. And our staff go out and check on their businesses every 3 months to see that they're operating according to their plan. And the other, which Cynthia's been great support for us, is I made an arrangement with the Prime Minister of Madagascar that we would set up a model village for Madagascar that could be used as a basis for the transformation of their country. And so we've adopted this village called Andrea Pamaki, and with the help of the Costa Foundation, we have made a hospital there. We have produced clean water, which we provide to the village. We give them a sports centre. We give them health education, and we give them careers guidance. So the idea is that we're looking to replicate this. We've found it's very successful. It's been going 8 years now. So we don't fit into this little thing, but I appreciate the opportunity through Cynthia to get an invite today. So this is a little bit of an advertisement to say, we're really interested in replicating this, not only in Madagascar, but in other countries because we know right at the Madagascar's been ravaged by the COVID epidemic. And, the knock-on effect of it is not only that they can't get vaccinated, but because they can't travel, they don't have a job. And if you don't have a job, you don't have any money. And so the businesses that rely on your custom don't have any income. So it's horrendous.
Thank you, Kevin, because what you're saying is, I mean, if you do dial into the Australian Philanthropy Awards, one of the things that we celebrate is replicable, if I can say the word, models, when it's a great example of transformative systemic change, and it's something that can be picked up and applied somewhere else. And so that's to be celebrated. And thank you. And I can see that the other Kevin has a question in the chat, Kevin Larkins, and it's a particularly good one. I think it might be nice to end on that. I think Gail and Cynthia, I'm running a bit late, aren't I? But if we could, Kevin, if you could unmute and ask that question, that'd be great.
I think I'm unmuted. Is that right?
You're good, yeah.
This session has just inspired me to think of a model that, whether the foundation would think of this, but I thought of a model where organisations were funded to put together a well-researched and properly costed proposal, and there would need to be, of course, a process whereby people are selected to do that, and they would be for major significant projects, and recognise what's required to put these proposals together. I was the recipient as a member of a board some years ago, back in the 70s, where this happened, and 3 organisations were chosen. We were one, and we were given $35,000 along with 2 others to put together a well-researched and innovative proposal to address the issue of homelessness among a population of young people who were, unemployment in a population of unemployable people, young people. And we spent a lot of time and effort and employed someone to put that together and looked at a structure that would do that. And whilst we were successful, the other 2 parties who weren't then had a product that they could use to develop further proposals. And I wondered whether any of the other foundations had thought of this in terms of identifying a particular issue at a particular time that specific organisations may be capable of putting together a response that would make a sustainable difference, but to do so required money to do that.
This is part of the whole collective impact conversation, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, there's some great examples. I know. I mean, I sound like, I work for the peak body and I'm turning it into a training session, but there are great examples when philanthropists come together around a particular issue. And to Alberto's earlier comment around collaboration, it's around starting starting specifically around a particular problem like homelessness or affordable housing, for example, with a particular cohort, and then they work together. We've got a group of funders that work on that around out-of-home care, and they've kicked some goals over recent years, and some of the funders in this room are involved with the Jobs and Skills Network that is again looking at, particularly amplified by COVID, with the issues around not being able to keep a job, casual work, all of it. And Alberto, I know you can speak to that. So the broad answer is yes, we want to see more of that in the world of philanthropy in Australia, and there's some great examples of it, but it takes some key leaders to come together and get it started.
My point is there acknowledgement of the need to fund the work, to get to the point that you get to. That's my point. I think we all know how hard it is, and the amount of effort that's required in organisations that don't have a lot of resources, but put them and apply them to grants, often unsuccessfully, and the money's spent but no return. And oftentimes you look at the grant and say, well, no, we can't afford the time for that. We've got to keep doing what we're doing. And so you have to be sensitive. I'm suggesting that the organisations who are putting these up be funded to do so.
And that's exactly what happens with these particular funder networks. They actually pool funds to pay the salary of someone that leads them through it in the recognition that this isn't their day job. So in each of those two examples I just gave you, the funders have provided multi-year funding for a facilitator to share their effort and lead.
Right. Misunderstood. Sorry, Patricia.
That's great. And Alberto, you were going to say something?
Sorry, no, I have to go. But yes, to that extent, there are then examples of collaborations that few foundations are coming together to tackle issues that require research up front. So it has been done in the past, and foundations are increasingly more aware of the need for it. All it takes is an idea and a person, a few champions. So it's about developing that relationship first and foremost, I'd say. And with that, I'm sorry, but I have to go to my next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us. I think at this stage, look, it's been a great discussion, and I think we need to turn over to Gail. And thank you all for staying. We've still got a lot in the room.
Thanks, Pat. And I know we're way over time and there are a lot of people that have left us, but for those of you who are still here, and perhaps for those of you who I haven't met, I'm the CEO of the Geelong Community Foundation, but more importantly, very engaged with other colleagues around the development of the Geelong Funders Collaborative. So, you know, some of the points that Kevin just made is, you know, classic conversation for the group that we've pulled together to talk about issues and opportunities. So I guess I would encourage engagement. The Geelong Funders Collaborative is made up of a number of organisations that are here today, and we meet on a regular basis for a range of reasons. Obviously, education is important for us so that we can understand what some of the issues are in the community. So to be educated as funders is really important. So we have invited guest speakers, we've invited group presentations, we visit organisations as a group, we have meetings at organisations. So we're really open to invites and opportunities to broaden our knowledge. We've done some collaborative funding already as a group in Geelong, but we've barely scratched the surface in terms of what is possible. So we're doing some strategic work as a group in the next couple of weeks to think about what's the next steps. Pat made a really good point at the beginning around the pain points that you have as applicants, and we would really like to understand those better so that if there are changes that we can make as funders to support you as applicants, you know, to understand those pain points are really important and would fit into our strategic discussions. So there will be a survey that we'll send out after this event. So please complete it and please make any notes that you may wish to feed back to us around any ideas. I mean, would it be helpful if we had just a one calendar of all of our grant rounds, something that's easily accessible so that you can look and plan easily around the work that you have to do. I think that's probably enough. We're way over time. I just wanted to really thank Pat for helping to facilitate these funders forums, which we've had 3 now, and it's been, you know, one of the goals of the Geelong Funders Collaborative that we do bring information to our region to support community organisations to access other funding. So I really do appreciate Pat in facilitating that, and the other members of the collaborative that are here, Anita, Gabby, and Amber's had to leave, and Alberto, and of course Cynthia, Anthony Costa Foundation, Kerry was here from Give Where You Live, Austin is here from Percy Baxter, Pat is here from Community Sector Banking, Geelong Connected Communities. Community Sector Banking is also involved with our group, as is the Dawn Wayne Foundation. So we're a broad group, but please share any information that you want to pass on through the survey to us, or get in touch with any one of us to provide any feedback or ideas for strategic engagement. A fabulous diverse group of people in the room today. So thank you so much for making the time, for coming along and hearing from our fabulous presenters. So thank you to those folk. And I wish you all well, and thanks very much for participating. Thank you.
Thank you all. See you next time. Take care.